All right, good morning or hi, everyone, whenever you watch this. So I'm taking a break from work. I'm doing a little bit of an escape from work just to kind of go back to OP. I really like OP, so it's a good way to relax. So one thing I wanted to do is actually dive a little bit deeper, a tiny bit deeper into the difference between an observation and a decision. I recently was rewatching a old Q&A from Dave and Shan where they kind of started to emphasize that, and I believe that they were really insightful. So I want to play the clip that I was listening to a little bit ago, and then hopefully elaborate as to how I experience this, how I see it, and hopefully this can help you both in typing and just in your everyday life. So let me go ahead and play it. It's going to come from this Q&A, Processing the OI/OE Coin Part 1. Of course, in classic OP fashion, I'm going to make it a bit faster for you guys. But other than that, let's get started here. Oh.
All right, this will be kind of a shit mess. Some TE processing, trying to talk out and think through OI and OE. Ideally, when we're typing somebody, you want to ask, are they observer or decider?
It's the biggest, largest one to start with. If
Right.
you can get away with starting with that one, you're going.
Right, because that's then going to filter down, allowing the tool to do the splitting for you.
Right.
Where now it'll then take you along for the ride, take you all the way down their type. But if you can't go down the avenue observer decider at first, then you kind of got to go chase down what may be hitting you in the face. Maybe sleep and play is hitting you in the face.
Right.
You got to go down that. So I think what needs to be defined is actually introvert and extrovert. It started kind of hitting me when we were typing the Nate class, the NF guy, the rapper guy.
Yeah.
So he has a way. So let me like an introverted function. An introverted function has a way. So they're stacking something. So for TI guy, he's stacking. Where is he? Right here.
Done do things.
But he's not stacking
OI.
So how can you tell the difference? Now somebody's TIOI, they're stacking, and it gets pretty
It's an
interesting.
intense. I have a way and I have a narrowed down, and
Right.
that's where you have to really get and understand deeply the difference between what a decision is and what an observation is.
Right.
And that's what gets really fucking tricky. Is it seems like the decisions are choices. It's an actual. I'm taking an action and I'm moving, and the observations are what it sounds like. It's information. It's what has happened or what will possibly happen, and that's what you're now going off of. This isn't. I'm taking an action on something. This is I'm seeing an observation. I'm seeing information. Then I go to take action on it. So you'll have like TI guys, for example, that will have their way of doing something, but it's only like I have decided that this app is the best, and I always use this app, or I always use this kind of coding, or I always use, and it's based on I figured something out. This is a choice, and I want to stack on that choice.
Okay, I'm writing down what you're saying, observations and decisions, before we get to introvert, extrovert.
Interesting.
So a choice, doing things, actions, and
sure.
then describing what an observation is. So like looking at planners, right? Like me, feminine NI, our friend who's SI. It's like, yeah.
Observations.
Yeah, let's tell the Uber story real quick.
Okay.
Friend of ours, going downtown
Okay.
and
Okay. All right. So that was quite a lot to play. I guess that's my consume. So let me slow down. I mean, I presented you with a lot of information all at once, right? So I apologize. I wasn't expecting it to take that long. But let me slow down and go through what they were saying specifically about the decisions and observations. So I'm going to pull back up that slide that they were starting, okay, and just walk through. So they were talking about how, in order to type, you need to really just start understanding each binary coin. That was kind of what they were starting with. But to the point of this video, there's a difference between observations and decisions. Now, what is the difference? So a decision, it's not surprising what a decision is. You are deciding to do something a certain way, right? And that decision can be either based on the extroverted spectrum, so that would be DE. You're making decisions based on what the tribe has to say, right? Or you could be doing it based off of introverted decisions. So you're deciding based on your own, usually personal standards, or your own way of your preferences on how to make decisions, right? So let's give an example, because I know they were about to give an example about OI, I think, but let me give an example of DI. And I'm going to be very, very nerdy, okay, for some of these. So let's say someone asks you as a child, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Now, that's a decision, ultimately. So there's some children, especially usually DI, where they're like, I want to be a firefighter, an astronaut, a pilot. In the case of some animes that I watch, I want to be, the king of the pirates, or I want to be king of this, king of that, right? That is an example of a decision from an introverted point of view, because as a child especially, you're asking yourself, right, what do I want to be, come hell or high water, right? What am I deciding to become in life, right? Versus a DE, so same situation. Let's say, and this happened to me, so I'll share my story. When I was growing up, they were asking me, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, well, and this was even me as a little kid. I was like, well, people seem to think I'm really good at playing piano. People seem to think I'm really good at music. So based on what other people are thinking, so TE, so based on what other people are thinking I should do, I should probably do that. So it's a decision based on an extroverted authority or an extroverted source of the decision, right? It's not coming from me per se. It's coming from the outside world guiding my decision per se, okay? Now, let's contrast that with an observation. An observation is not a decision. So, and I think that's where David and Shannon were right to say people get confused between the two, because an observation is something you are passive about, right? So an observation is, hey, don't, like, it's almost like, so this is gonna be my NE. You know how people say don't shoot the messenger? That is pretty much how all observations feel, right? It's like, well, don't blame me. I'm not responsible for what I'm seeing. I'm just seeing this, right? And so an observation is, I'm using the word seeing, but anything that you are perceiving about the world, let's say, and again, it can either come from an extroverted point of view or an introverted. So let me give two examples of what these observations would be like. So let's go back to the same scenario, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? So when you're like 5 years old, okay? Someone's asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What an observation would be, okay, so let's start with the introverted one. Introverted observation would not be a commentary on the decision. It would be more of a commentary on what you see. So, hey, and I see this with little kids even. It's like, hey, I always play piano at this time. That is an observation more so, right? Some people can make a decision on that, sure. But let's say they're like, hey, I always seem to do this, or I always see that other people clap when I play piano, let's say, right? Now, that could be DE, DI, whatever, but that's something where the introverted is finding familiarity, right? So an OI observation is, I always see the same thing, right? It's not a decision, because again, you can see that people are clapping or that you play piano, and you can make a different decision from that, right? Like for example, for me, I ended up making a different decision despite, let's say, the OI in my life, where I was playing piano a lot, I was singing a lot, people were clapping at music a lot. I decided something else, but the observation was introverted, where I'm like, look, I'm seeing the same thing. And in contrast, what OE would be doing is, let's say, same situation. What do you want to be when you grow up? OE would be like, well, I don't know. I haven't experienced enough yet. Let me wait until I see all the options, right? Let me see what I'm like when I'm, cooking, or let me see what I'm like when I'm playing basketball or whatever. OE is more about gathering new observations about the world before making a decision, especially if you're an observer, right? So now, why is this difference important, right? Well, I mean, for starters, it's going to help you understand the OP animals, right? Because the OP animals, I don't know if they have a slide here, but I definitely have it in my checklist. The OP animals are a combination of an observation and a decision working together. All of the OP animals are an observation and a decision working together. So I'm going to show you what that looks like on my checklist here. Okay. So, all right. So starting with the energy animals, right? Play and sleep and play. You start with, and so these would be kind of the most, let's say, straightforward, I would argue, because it's like they're both of the source of both the decision and the action are coming from the same place. So for example, for sleep, they observe something familiar or repeated in the world, right? That, look, I always see it this way, and it should always be this way, right? So that's kind of what the observation is. You can start predicting things. So, okay, I am always seeing that I like piano, therefore I'm going to do piano, right? So that would be an example of sleep. So DI, I decided I'm doing piano because I always do piano. So there's a familiarity. It's going over known information, so it's consistent with the definition here and things like that. In contrast, play, my saviors. Okay, the tribe is always saying, I am good at music or I'm good at business coaching. So they are saying I'm good at that. But then the OE, which is I mean, kind of dumb, but the OE is like, well, let me go try out a few other things and see how the tribe reacts to that. So it expends a lot of energy trying out all the options just to get the best approval from the tribe, right? And then in contrast, this is where it's going to get a little bit complicated with the info animals. I know I'm taking a little bit of time because I'm trying to I'm trying to kill time till noon basically. But so consume would be DI and OE. So OE is like, so DI is like, look, let's say you make a decision like, I want to be a firefighter. Sure. Okay, let's say I want to be a firefighter. You made the decision. Or actually, no, what was I saying? Why am my channel changing? Fuck. Music, right? I want to play music. But then OE is going to be like, okay, well, let me gather every single type of music and let me look at all the different options of music before I start really practicing those musics. Now the decision is still, I want to be a pianist, or I still want to do music, but the OE is now gathering new information for that identity randomly, right? There's no familiarity, right? And then finally, last but not least, you have DE and OI. So DE is like, this would be again, the tribe is telling me I should be a musician, okay? Therefore, let me use all of the known information I have about music, right? So I always play at this time, I always play these scales, I always play these artists, and let me double down on what I know to be true and what I've seen, let's say, repeatedly, in order to please the tribe. So this would be an example of someone who, this is gonna sound effed up, but there are people who, yeah, they choose their career based on what their parents or what their society have, and then they master it, right? And then they have a midlife crisis because they're like, I didn't do what I want. But let's ignore that for 2 seconds. Anyway, I'm taking a little while. Let me wrap up. There is a difference between an observation and decision. An observation is something that you just straight up see. It's passive, right? An observation is passive. Even OI, right? Because OI, sometimes it feels like OI, Dave and Shannon talk about OI forcing its way, or I personally sometimes feel like OI is forcing an observation, and sometimes it is, but it's not coming from a decision. It's more like, so think about it this way. OI is like, I've seen something repeat itself so many times that it has to happen again, right? It's kind of like that. It's like, I'm gonna force it that way because I feel like that's the observation that's gonna happen anyway, whether I get involved or not, right? So that's OI. And then OE is just more like the more traditional gathering, right? Whereas a decision, there is an active component. And decisions are about actions, right? So it's like, okay, I am deciding to be this identity, or the tribe is deciding for me that I'm this identity, or so on, right? So it's a difference between action and, it's a difference between being active in the case of decisions and passive in the case of observations. And then when you combine it with the introverted wants something familiar and something that's coming from within, right? So an OI observation is something where you're like, look, I've seen this thousands of times. It's familiar. It's something that I can pull out of my memory, even if I don't see the outside world, basically. I can remember, okay, it always goes like this, and therefore let me use that observation to guide my decisions, basically. DI is coming from the inside, but it's active, right? It's like it's an internal, I am deciding to go in this direction, come hell or high water, come OE or OI, doesn't matter. I am deciding to move in that direction. And the extroverted spectrum is more gathering as much about the outside world as possible and not really narrowing down internally. So it's more like DE is like, let me gather as many tribe perspectives as possible to make a decision. And then OE is just gathering as many facts, observations, whatever, before it can feel certain about, okay, let me trust what's in my brain, right? Now, this is very long. However, I do believe that this is something that I do need to emphasize. I probably need to make a few other videos about this. But I just wanted to make this while, just to kill time, to be honest. So I'm going to go back to work. Work is not great, but you know what? Let me get back to doing my demons or whatever. I'm not going to pretend this was the clearest explanation I've ever given. So feel free, if you have questions, comments, pushback, leave it in the comments. I will include this Q&A source for you. It's the first few minutes of the Q&A, as you saw, for you to reference. But other than that, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next video that I make.